Let's take a look at how Dorico handles chord symbols. I'm going to start by typing some in. They're down here, but if you click this button without selecting anything on the page, then nothing's going to happen. So select where you want to put a chord symbol, click the chord symbol button, or type Shift Q for the popover. Okay, I'm going to type A minor 9, then I can use the arrows to go along by the grid, or I can hit space to move along by a beat, or I can hit tab to go to the next downbeat. So I'm going to go D13 flat 9, and when I tab over to the next bar, Dorico turns that into quite a nice looking chord symbol. B minor 7, B flat 13, sharp 11. I find it quicker and easier to play in chord symbols on my MIDI keyboard, so let me just do a few of these. Okay, looking good. A nice thing about doing it with a MIDI keyboard is that if I switch over to play mode for a second, then you can see there's this global chord track at the top. If you click this speaker button, it can play back the voicings you played. In order to do that, I'll have to assign an instrument. So I've got Halion loaded in automatically. That's the VST instrument that comes with Dorico. So I'm going to set this to that. Then I need to pick a channel that isn't used by any of my other instruments. So I'm going to go with channel 2, and then click this button to get into Halion. Okay, channel 2's here. Let's find an instrument. I might just put an electric piano on it. What does this one sound like? Horrendous, but it'll do. I'm sure you can find a nicer sound for chord playback. Let's have a listen. I think the other thing that sounds wrong about this, apart from the fact the tempo is too fast, is that it needs a bit of swing. So I'm going to knock down the tempo. Then I'm going to open the tempo popover again. And if I start typing light, you need to arrow down and actually select it. And now I get a signpost that won't print, but will affect the playback. Let's take a listen. Much better. Now, I already said chord symbols are global, so if I go to setup mode and add a piano, chord symbols will appear automatically. However, if I put in, say, a violin, you're not going to see any chord symbols. And that's because if you right-click on any player and go chord symbols, you're going to see it's set to show for rhythm section instruments only. So if I wanted to show it on the violin, I'd have to click show for all instruments. You do need to set these one at a time. This menu just applies to this player. Alternatively, if I wanted to give my violinist a solo for a few bars, I could set this option to show in chord symbols and slash regions. Okay. And then I'm just going to double click to get into write mode. That's a quick way in. And then I could grab a few bars, and on the right menu, I can go create slash region, which will give slashes and chord symbols. Or alternatively, if I didn't want the slashes, I could grab a region and go write create chord symbol region. Like most other things, these regions are adjustable and extendable with Alt and the arrows to move, and Shift and Alt and the arrow keys to extend or contract. Let me just point you towards some preferences for chord symbols. They're actually in two different places. So the first is at the bottom of the right menu in Note Input Options, and go to Chord Symbols. There's a range of options here for how Dorico interprets what you play in. And then let me show you another set of preferences for how Dorico displays chord symbols. This one only applies to you if you're on Dorico Pro, as it's in engrave mode. So I'm going to switch to engrave mode. Notice how the right menu gets replaced by the engrave menu. And then click Engraving Options, then Chord Symbols. You could click through these presets. I'll try Nashville, and apply, and all your chord symbols change in one go. And then if you set it to jazz standards and apply, your chord symbols are going to change again. These presets aren't necessarily perfect, But what they're actually doing is they go through all of these hundreds of other settings. For instance, you might decide that you want these settings that I just set, but with a minus for minor chord symbols. So you could just go and change the minus, and then apply, and it's going to change them all in one go. Now, there are so many of these, I can't go through them all, but I need to point out that at the bottom of this dialog, or you can click it down here, this project default appearances. If I go in here, I can put in, let's say, B-7, and it'll give me B-7, and then you can go in and grab a particular component and change it, and you'll see it's changed all of my B-7s, but it'll leave your minor 9s and so on and so forth.